Now, to be filed away under the topic of terrible ideas that just won't die, I'm going to have to say a few things about the people who think it is a brilliant and original idea to split the United States into two. Now it's generally Republican types that are saying it, but 20 years ago it was Democrats who were saying this. They used to have this map that you can see over here that erases the existence of the United States to the extent that the blue states are joined with Canada as somehow a more enlightened country of very irregular shape, and the red states are categorized as Jesus land, including swing states that may have gone red by a very narrow margin. This was absurd on many levels, including the assumption that everyone in Canada is entirely in approval of the U.S. Democrat ideology. I can guarantee that people in the prairie provinces of Canada are much more inclined to the right from a U.S. understanding of left versus right. So stupid maps like that were produced, and you always had these celebrities who threatened to move to Canada, and they were effectively saying that America is so racist that they want to move to a country that is much whiter than the United States. Okay, so that was the leftist version of this. But now Republicans and even libertarians are coming up with the same idea and even stupider points than that. And that includes some people who have been longtime viewers of this channel, people who should be much too intelligent to suggest that splitting the United States among left and right is going to solve all the problems. I can give you at least 20 reasons why that is a terrible, terrible idea. I will go through just a few of those 20 in this video over here. But let me just state a few. Number one, the United States is the world's reserve currency because it has the largest GDP, the highest collective net worth, the most mature capital markets, and the most mature type of sovereign debt, the U.S. Treasuries. If the United States were split into two countries of equal size, neither would be the world's reserve currency because neither would be the world's largest economy. They would both be joint number 2 largest economies of the world after China. And upon losing reserve currency status, the standard of living in the United States would fall about 20%. The reason the United States has a standard of living somewhat higher than Canada and Australia, when the U.S. worker is not necessarily any more productive than the worker in Canada or Australia, is because the U.S. is the world's reserve currency and it can sustain a level of deficit spending and national debt much higher than any other country. If the U.S. were to lose world's reserve currency status, standard of living would fall very, very sharply. Now, there would be a lot of cleansing in that process. That may not be an entirely bad thing because the size of the federal government would also have to shrink a lot and we might no longer have a military-industrial complex, for example. But nobody wants a 20% reduction in standard of living. And remember that China and a few other countries are trying to create an alternative currency mechanism known as BRICS. Now, I don't take that very seriously as I describe in this video up here in the upper right-hand corner because the letter S tells me this is not really very serious. It is more about being woke because South Africa is too small of an economy to be included in this group, BRICS. BRIC was already a rather bogus distinction and BRICS makes it completely unserious. Ultimately, China is much larger than all of those other economies combined. The very distant number 2 is India, and India's economy is less than 1/4 the size of China. So loss of reserve currency status is automatically a reason why this is a terrible idea. But the second terrible idea is that anyone advocating it seems to know nothing about the history of U.S. presidential elections. In 1984, this was the presidential election results map for the United States. Ronald Reagan versus Walter Mondale. Ronald Reagan won 49 states. Mondale won just one state, Minnesota, which is where he was from, and Washington, D.C. So every state was red. California, the biggest Democrat state today, and in fact the biggest state in the entire country, was red even in 1988. So many states have actually migrated from being red to being blue, while there has been virtually no migration in the other direction. So Republicans think that they can just separate from the states that have become blue, but they have not addressed the core problem about how the entire trajectory is towards being blue. And this is on top of the fact that both parties move leftward. If you actually just studied things that Walter Mondale and Jimmy Carter said when they were running for president in 1980 and 84, and not what their opponent, Ronald Reagan, said. By today's standards, most of Carter and Mondale's speech terms would generally be considered right-wing today. So the leftward drift is above and beyond this red and blue, more formal drift. Republicans love to surrender and lose and then complain about having lost after the fact, and that is why states that used to be red are all turning blue. Even California was a red state as recently as 1988, but now even Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado are blue. Virginia is also blue. These all were red until relatively recently. So if a Republican type of country were to split off, there would only be continuous left-wing surrender even after that point, and then they would have to split the country again and again. And hey, the good news is after about 25 splits or so, then every single person could be their own country. We've abolished all countries because every single person could be their own country because of endless disputes with other people. So you could get this half-life type of effect. So that's the second level of ignorance. The third is that red state and blue state is not a rigid distinction. Only 37 of 50 states have voted exclusively for one party in just the 21st century. So now we're not even talking about Ronald Reagan in 1984. We are talking about 2004 onwards, and 37 states have stayed one color, whereas 13 states have voted for either party. These are known as swing states, and it's not always the same swing states in each election because states go from swing to blue, almost never the other way around for any sustainable period of time. And therefore, even this red state, blue state split is very, very ignorant. Secondly, aren't Republicans rightfully complaining a lot about a porous border? So what sense does it make to have a country with half the area but 5 times as much border because of its very irregular shape? What are the borders of this country? Why would illegal immigration into their Republican country stop? Because the Democrats would be very, very interested in offloading people into the Republican country to turn parts of that blue so that they cede from the Republican country and get back annexed into the blue Democrat country until the entire United States is united once again under blue, which is the direction it's going anyway. So the notion that these people can run away from the problem is wrong for that additional reason. So we've seen that the state level division doesn't work. Okay, what about county level division? Now you can see this map over here. One truth about U.S. politics is that tendency to vote Democrat is correlated to population density of a county, and the tendency to vote Republican is correlated inversely to that. The big cities and densely populated suburban counties vote Democrat, and the other 85% of the land comprises red counties. So are you going to split the country this way? Why would they agree to those blue islands that are not contiguous to each other? But this gets even stupider. In the United States, almost all the food is produced by counties that are red. This includes fruit and vegetable products, meat products, dairy products, everything. At the same time, almost all airports that can handle normal commercial aircraft are in blue counties. Almost all corporate headquarters are in blue counties. Almost all universities are in blue counties. And I mean big universities. Some liberal arts college might be in a county that's technically red, but every major university is in a county that is blue. And if it is a college town, the university is in fact what made that county blue, such as Washtenaw County, which Ann Arbor, Michigan is in, where the University of Michigan is located. That county is blue even if many other suburban Michigan counties are red. So how will you divide this country? All the food is produced by the red counties. All the corporate headquarters and airports are in the blue counties. That is why a country is not like an earthworm that you can just cut it into 2 pieces and then each of the 2 pieces survives and turns into an original new earthworm. It is more like a human. You cannot cut a large human in half and create 2 small humans. You will merely have a gruesome mess and 2 dead pieces if you do that. And the same is true for cutting the United States into a red and blue division. Absolutely nothing about this has been thought through at all. It is one of the dumbest things that one could possibly think about. They actually talk about it as though it is an intelligent point, a national divorce. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a person very high on bombast but very low on policy substance, actually talks about this as though this is a good idea. See this clip.
A national divorce is not a civil war. It's actually separating by red states and blue states. I think it's something that we should work towards because, it's kind of the vision that our founding fathers had.
These are the types of people who are prominent legislators in our legislative body. And Democrats have equally stupid people on their side. And once again, I say there's no recognition about the fact that the Republican Party went from controlling 49 states as recently as 1984 to now only controlling 25, 26, 27 states now. Many, many states went from red to blue, most notably California. Yet they think splitting will freeze their red country in amber and make it immune to other such inoculation. This brings up yet another reason why this is wrong. There is only one English language media in the world, and it's generally very left-wing. As longtime viewers know, my sister is a political contributor in Australia because Australian people have been so inundated with U.S. politics that that's all they pay attention to. They don't even pay attention to local Australian politics anymore because that does not have enough people interested in it to be curated into television-worthy content at the world level. The U.S. being that big has crowded out all other English language media with its politics. So if Australia is vulnerable to getting sucked into the U.S. media cobweb, the quicksand of wokeness and everything like that, memes that have no relevance to Australia or New Zealand are still what young people cannot stop talking about. So the notion that this red country that Republicans want to create as a separate entity from parts of the United States could stay immune from this left-wing media is absurd. There is only one English language media blob in the entire world, and if it can affect Australia and New Zealand, it's not going to stay out of Texas and Wyoming and South Dakota and other such red states that will form a very irregularly shaped country. So these are just some of the reasons why this idea is extremely bad, but we'll also go to this clip from Bill Maher, who also says how this is terrible.
You can't really think about the Irish without thinking about division. And I can't help thinking about us right now when I think about that. The Irish island is still not whole, and Northern Ireland, the part that is still part of England despite its majority Catholic population, went through a period where political hatred born of religion turned into something called the Troubles, which meant the hatred got so bad it could not be contained by the usual means of disagreement. So people lived with bombings and sniping and urban warfare. In America, our warring factions aren't Catholics and Protestants, but that same level of hatred, of otherization, is happening between Democrats and Republicans. We've grown less religious, but that's because politics has become our religion. We used to pray for the nation. Now each side prays the other side doesn't destroy the nation. On one side, the Church of Woke wants to cleanse us of our past, and on the other, the cult of Trump wants to resurrect it. But that's where we are. Your fellow citizens who support the other party aren't just wrong, they're heretics who have to be destroyed. Political identities have become stronger than religious ones, stronger even than racial. 94% of adults are now cool with interracial marriage. It's inter-party marriage that's a deal breaker for a majority of Republicans and Democrats who don't want their kids marrying someone who belongs to the other. America's national leprechaun, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she didn't invent our country's polarization any more than she could spell it, but she's playing with the kind of fire that made Northern Ireland a living hell for so long when she says, we need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states. We're done. And then she threw Biden's things out on the lawn and said, I'll be at my mother's. But a full third of likely voters agree with her and approve of a national divorce. With Texas the most enthusiastic, 66% of all voters there are ready to split, including 59% of Democrats. But just voicing this idea is dangerous because it reinforces the belief that you can't even talk to those people. You just have to somehow nullify their very existence by creating a country only of your type of people. It's always such a tempting thought, isn't it? If we could just keep the assholes out of where we, the good people, are, this would be such a great place. But where do you draw the line as to how much someone can disagree with you before they're an asshole too? Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert seemed pretty joined at the hip for a while. They both loved God, guns, and gas stoves. But they reportedly had a bathroom fight in January, of course, over a guy, Kevin McCarthy. But Marjorie, does this mean that Lauren doesn't get to live with you now in the new free republic of Jesus-sippy? And what about your own state of Georgia, which has a Republican governor and 2 Democratic senators? What are you going to do with the 2.5 million Georgia residents who voted for the Democrats? Put them on a plane to Martha's Vineyard? What about the 12% of Bernie voters who listed their second choice as Trump? Sounds like this new red state country is going to have to itself split into 2, or maybe more, since there are many Republicans who want to legalize pot. What I call the good ones. And same on the blue side. I assume abortion won't just be legal in Newsom land, but encouraged. But what about the 25% of Democrats who oppose abortions? What I call the bad ones. Or the 28% who have a gun. Seems like we're going to need a lot more new countries than just the 2. Or we could just stick with the 1. The 1. The one where everybody gets to disagree on everything except for one thing. You have to want to stay in the marriage. You can't call yourself a patriot of the United States and not be for the whole united part. So this St. Patty's Day, let's take that whole "we're all Irish on St. Patty's Day" thing and replace it with "we're all Americans every day."
And he's absolutely right. You are not fond of this country if you want to separate from the other half of the people in this country. You don't even know what it means to be an American. Part of why the United States appeals to me, and I recognize it as the primary best hope for humanity, is because of how much it can achieve through economies of scale. And that includes being the world's reserve currency. English language domination of the world is also a part of that, even though the English language obviously originated not in the United States, but in the UK. Anyone who talks about splitting the United States is not patriotic, is someone who just wants to run away from a fight without even understanding that they have already ceded so much ground that this will continue to persist in their new country that they supposedly think is immune to this type of encroachment of Democrat left-wing ideas. And they don't understand the problem at all, because this two-party system creates this acrimony where it need not exist. If you randomly selected 100 Americans and put them in a room and had them hash out ideas about policy in a very dry and esoteric type of way, stripped out of party-level propaganda on particular issues, you will find that the middle 70% of people are reasonable and mostly agree with each other, and only 30% at the fringes, 20% far left, 10% far right who are actually far left but don't realize it, in that they have left-wing economic views, they just have a very race-centric ideology. Those are the weirdos. The middle 70% would get along just fine and agree on most things, as all rational people would. The other problem with this splitting, a lot of the people who advocate that, they want their red country to be mostly white, which is what it would be relative to at least the blue country. But then they assume that women and men have the same political views, which means you know nothing about contemporary politics if that's the case. Look at this chart over here. Influence of media, the destruction of the two-parent family, which Republicans are very, very complicit in. They've done at least half of the propaganda to destroy the two-parent family. that has resulted in the political opinions of women veering very far left. Men have been stable for quite a long time, but women have moved far to the left. That's why dating is at an all-time low in the United States. Marriage is at an all-time low. Men and women are just getting further and further apart. So what type of country do these Republicans who think they can stitch together a red state country actually envision? Do they want their country to be 80% male? How will they overcome the problem illustrated by this chart? They haven't even thought that through. They still think that splitting up red states and blue states, even though that only accounts for 37 of 50 states under clear demarcation, is the answer, while not taking into account the fact that men and women themselves have moved politically very far apart. You see, those are very, very challenging problems to address and reverse, and that is why the simple-minded people who think that splitting the United States into two parts and who never provide any details about how this would work and exactly where the lines would be drawn really have no answers to these questions and have never even heard these points before, because they're operating on a very oversimplified low IQ level, whether they call it national divorce or something like that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is enamored with this term of national divorce because she is someone who got divorced. She was a mother with 3 children, and she had an affair with her tantric sex coach. That's actually an Indian concept. It's pronounced tantric sex coach. I thought Republicans stand for family values. Ooh, nothing represents family values more than a mother of 3 committing adultery with her tantric sex coach. But that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And one of the leading lights in this idea meme of splitting the United States between red and blue states. There's more points I could bring up, but these few that I brought up already indicate how incredibly stupid of an idea it is and how the people advocating it haven't thought beyond the first line about where would the splits be, the states or counties. What about the world's reserve currency point? What about the diverging political views of men and women? Anyway, this video is getting pretty long, so we can conclude it over here. And if you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much for watching.